Okay, hi, hello, how are you? I hope you're well. My name is David Parsons. This is the Nostalgia Trap podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoy the talk I have for you today. My guest is someone who I've wanted to talk to for a while. I first encountered her writing in the New Republic, where she writes on a host of issues, mainly around poverty and the left, the Democratic Party, feminism, and what most appealed to me and why I wanted to talk to her, I think, is because she comes from the Appalachian region of the country, a region that, for those of you who know your American history, has been the kind of like focal point of a lot of conversations about, white poverty, the white working class, hillbillies, obviously a lot of stereotypes thrown towards that region. And I include myself. I don't know a whole lot about Appalachia. I don't have a deep knowledge of its culture and its politics, but Sarah Jones does, and she has a really unique perspective on all that stuff because she's a person of the left, and I think she came to her politics in a lot of ways in part because of the place she's from. So we had a great conversation about that and how she came to not only her politics, but being a writer and engaging with the whole political scene that way. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with Sarah Jones, and you can find more of this stuff at nostalgiatrap.com. All the episodes there are free, but if you want, I hope that you would consider subscribing to the show at patreon.com/nostalgiatrap. There are already a bunch of people that are giving me $5 a month. I'm sending stuff out to them now, physical, real stuff like bumper stickers and buttons that say all sorts of ridiculous left-wing nostalgia trap nonsense on them. So that stuff's on the way for subscribers. Thank you so much for the people that are giving me money. And if you want to join them, again, you can go to patreon.com/nostalgiatrap. And we've got bonus episodes and other stuff happening for subscribers too. So check that out and consider becoming a part of our team, because this show is something that I want to keep making. And if I get a little energy coming my way in the form of American dollars, I think I'll be much happier and it'll be much easier for me to keep continuing to produce these shows. So thanks a lot for supporting this show, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. This is me talking with a New Republic writer, Sarah Jones. Sarah Jones, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thanks
we edit
for
these
having
conversations, so don't worry about whatever.
Okay.
If you say something untoward, we'll edit it out.
That's nice.
Yeah. Actually, maybe we'll highlight it because I like it sometimes. That's where you find the truth. I know hardly anything about you. I've met you. I've met you just now. But we've interacted online a little bit. Your Twitter feed is one of those that that caught my attention because you talk about class in a particular way and the way you write, and I was like very interested in where that comes from. So I wanted to talk to you.
Okay.
So thanks for sitting down. So a lot of this show is is about kind of tracing people's biographies. So I feel like, and I could be wrong, but I feel like where you're from had a lot to do with shaping like your politics. So where are you from?
So I'm from Washington County, Virginia, which is way on the border with East Tennessee, and Western North Carolina. So it's considered part of coal country, even though there's no coal in Washington County. It's just kind of part of the whole area in Southwest Virginia. So it's very rural. It's very sparsely populated. It's really poor.
So and that's the environment that you're coming of age.
Yeah, exactly.
Are your parents involved in the coal industry or steel or any of those industries?
No, that's one of the bizarre things. My parents are actually classical musicians.
Whoa.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. It's very strange. They ended up in Southwest Virginia partially because of public arts funding and visiting artist program, and they liked it, so they decided to settle down. So we moved there when I was pretty young. I don't remember very much, but
like
Appalachia.
Public arts funding that is building culture from a federal, like the federal government is sponsoring this?
Yeah, it's often like state or federal money, as I remember it, and it's obviously been quite a while now. My dad would go into the local public schools and put on performances of pieces like Peter and the Wolf and The Young Person's Guide to the Orchestra to introduce these kids to classical music. And it's a really musical area to begin with, and so it wasn't exactly a tough sell. People actually care about it.
What do you mean when you say it's a musical area to begin with?
Well, this is the heart of real bluegrass, not even what's coming out of Nashville, but my hometown, Bristol, was where the Carter family recorded their first session. So there's a really strong musical culture there.
I see. God, when I think of arts programs, I mean, I think of like two things, I guess, like the New Deal, having like these big arts programs, federal arts programs, and then I think of arts programs being attacked like during the NEA era. So is this like the 70s? I'm just trying to like, is it 80s that your parents were doing this?
They were doing it before I was born, but it was just kind of a reoccurring feature when I was growing up. And then we moved when I was around 7, 8. I can't remember exactly, but it was around then. So in the 90s.
So I'm thinking like, when I think about people on the left now, I'm like, I always want to know, and this is part of the point of this show is kind of understanding how political were your parents? Were your parents like super lefties? Super righties? Were they all right? You know, what are we dealing with here? Or apolitical?
We are dealing with fundamentalist Christians, as a matter of fact. So they were very much in the religious right at the time, and they homeschooled us for quite a while with very religious textbooks. So like Bob Jones University, Pensacola Christian College, and they have transitioned a bit away from that now and are sort of a bit regretful that they were as involved with it as they were. But, you know, anti-LGBT, anti-abortion, very, very conservative.
Did you fight with them about that stuff, or is that stuff that became internalized for you for a while?
I internalized it for a long time, although I kind of chafed against the gender roles specifically.
Yeah.
And then in my early 20s, when I kind of decided this was not for me at all, we did fight about it pretty bitterly. And now we're just sort of at the point where it's not worth ripping the family apart over. And we finally have all gotten to the point where we have some interesting conversations about it.
The early 20s, I feel like are just, that's the era when you break with your parents.
Yep.
And I mean, I certainly experienced that in my own life. Like, I definitely think that, like, my parents regretted sending me to college because I came back and was like, you're racist, you're sexist, you're pig, you know, and, like, explained to them about inequality and actually the reason why there's crime and all that kind of stuff. And they just thought I was an insufferable asshole, I think, for coming back and, like, just attacking them. And then, there's this balance that happens throughout as you get older.
Yeah. Like, now, like, they hate Donald Trump, for example.
Okay.
So I can work with that.
Why do they hate Donald Trump, though?
They are of the opinion that he makes a mockery out of their religion, so they're very offended by that, actually. And they do think that he's a misogynist, and they actually do think he's racist. So, like, I can work with that at this point.
We've got some dough to work with there.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really funny. I feel like, there are a lot of, like, quote-unquote traditional or conservative Americans who are repulsed by Donald Trump because he doesn't really fit that mold. Like, he's I feel like my parents are disgusted with Trump from a patriotic perspective. You know what I mean? He dirties this country. He disrespects the country. And it's like, I'm not really on that patriotic tip at all. I hate him from a different perspective, but it feels like there's a growing coalition of like right and left hating him, but we'll see where that goes. All right, so like, did you go to college in your 20s?
I did.
Is that what happened to you too?
Well, that's also a funny story. I went to Cedarville University, which is this extremely conservative Baptist college out in Ohio, and it was terrible. Like, it was it was the sort of place you had to go to chapel every day, and you had to minor in Bible, and then my clothing was very restricted. We had a weekday curfew and a weekend curfew.
God, it's weird. I don't think of like Southern Baptism as that like conservative. I guess so, right?
Yeah. And it's like all this complicated bullshit about how the school used to be associated with the General Association of Regular Baptists, which was ruled by this very ominous sounding like Council of 12, and then they decided
Council of 12.
This is
like eyes wide shut shit.
Yeah, this is like deep Baptist. Yeah, so then they decided, okay, we're not this anymore, and now they're sort of loosely affiliated with the Southern Baptists, and they've actually gotten worse for being affiliated with the Southern Baptists.
My aunt is one of the first female Baptist ministers in the state where she comes from in Washington. So yeah, there's a little baptism and Southern stuff in my family. My name Parsons is all over Virginia.
That is correct.
Yeah. And I know that's where my dad's side of the family comes from. Anyway, that baptism, I recognize it.
Yeah.
Some of it.
It's very serious, and like not incidentally, this is where I decided I was an atheist. And then I went to grad school. And now here I am.
Like that's where you discovered Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Oh, God. No, I think that was just the internet. That was just like a terrible thing that happened on the internet.
Well, I mean, so being there in an environment like that, I mean, it feels like you were. I mean, did you feel like you had a choice in that school? Was that like where you chose, or was it something that your parents had a big influence on you?
It was like a number of different things. Like it was a choice. It wasn't my top choice actually for school, but they gave me a lot of scholarship money and we didn't have any money. So that was a big deal. And also I did come from this conservative Christian
Did you think
culture.
you would like it?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I did. Well, because it was like, this sounds crazy to say now, but like compared to other Christian colleges, it seemed like reasonable. Like I could wear pants. They couldn't be jeans if I was in class, but I could wear pants. And like that should
be the school slogan. You can wear pants.
Yeah, but they're probably going to change it. Who knows?
Yeah.
Like they're terrible.
What was the student body like there? Were other students like true believers? Like, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, although it's like an interesting, I've noticed interesting divisions over the years, like even over the 4 years where I was like on campus full time. Most of us, the overwhelming majority of the student body comes there because that is what we are from. It's a lot of homeschoolers, Christian schoolers, and like very conservative public schoolers. And
so there's not a lot of like people from New York that came down to go to school.
No.
Yeah,
this is like
local experience.
No, it's very Southern and very Midwestern.
Yeah.
And so like people would either become more conservative or they would become less conservative, or they were totally apathetic, didn't care, and like didn't change at all over the 4 years.
As you're changing, do you feel like alienated from the culture there? And did you have a group of friends that were also like, fuck this place, let's bust out,
Yeah, I did. I hung out with Mennonites a lot because they were pacifists, so they got like looked down on. And like I am actually closer friends with some of the people I went to school with now because we are closer in our ideological perspectives than we were when I was a student. And I'm still actually quite close with some of my professors there who were not as conservative, and many of them ended up having to leave the school. So it's
like leave the school under what circumstances? Like it's just not working out there.
As in, like, sign an NDA and leave, that kind of thing.
Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah,
and never talk about this again.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, as an academic person, many of my friends in graduate school were, like, considering, we would talk about a lot, like, should we go teach at religious schools? And I was always like, fuck no. Like, there's no way I would do that. I couldn't. Like, unless it was a school that was, like, a school that they didn't, a very moderate religious school.
Like a Catholic school.
I guess. I don't know. I mean, I haven't really been around religion in my life. My parents didn't send me to church or anything like that. So, like, it's not something I'm terribly familiar with. And usually I kind of have an asshole's attitude towards religion. I mean, I hate the whole, like, new atheism, Neil deGrasse Tyson shit,
same, yeah.
Dawkins and all that. But I also, like, have an old school disgust with religion generally.
Yeah, like I'm sympathetic to that. I don't miss the church. I don't ever want to go back. I also have a deep disgust for new atheism and the Islamophobia in particular that I've seen in it. But at the same time, like it is like I have participated in interfaith work, like as an atheist working with people of faith, and I think it's important, and I don't think I necessarily have to understand why it appeals to people, but I really don't understand why it appeals to people. So
I mean, it's really, really hard because I'm like one of these people that feels like it's really easy to be condescending about religious people, and people that are like snarky New Yorkers are very easy to fall into that kind of stuff, but at the same time, like whenever people are like earnestly religious in front of me, I can't help this switch happens in my mind where I'm like, I think you're crazy. Like, I think you're nuts. And like, that is a terrible, awful way of feeling. Like I want to understand, but at the same time, it's a big barrier.
It's hard. I actually weirdly have more patience for it when I'm back home, even as I find most of the manifestations actually of Christianity back home to be very bigoted. The religious expression itself is something that I'm more sympathetic to because when you have nothing else, like literally nothing else in your life, if it brings them some comfort, that's where I'm like, okay, I don't have to understand it. I kind of get why you would go to a faith healer, especially if you can't afford a doctor. But outside that context, I have a hard time.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because I'm with you because like when I see people praying, it makes me want to cry. It touches me. You know what I mean? Like I'm like, oh, that's how people make it. And I know that like at different points in my life, I guess because I'm just a cliche like white guy hippie dude that like I've gone to like Eastern religion when I've had stress in my life, you know, and I'm like, oh, I'll just read this, about Buddhism on Wikipedia and learn some things that'll help me. But it's like I feel like it is an innate human desire to like connect with and deal with some kind of spirituality, whatever it might be.
Yeah, I feel like we want to understand. We want to we want there to believe that there is some overarching meaning, and I think it's very difficult to kind of admit to yourself that you don't believe there's any sort of overarching meaning. You're an animal on the planet. You didn't ask to be here, but you're here, and now you have to figure it out, and that's very difficult even as an atheist sometimes to accept. And I can kind of get why for some people it's just you don't want to.
Jesus is easier.
Jesus is easy. Like the whole idea that
you don't feel so alone too.
You can talk to him. Like the evangelical notion of Jesus as this person where you have like an actual relationship with, like it's not abstract to them. They really believe it, and you can talk to him and he talks to you, and like he loves you unconditionally. Like that's what people want.
That's the part that always got me though, because I went to youth groups when I was a kid, and like they were like, the kind of rap that's very common there is like, well, open your heart to God, open your heart to Jesus, and kind of like talk to him, and he'll talk back. And that was the part that I was like, I don't understand the talking back part.
Yeah, it's a
big leap for me.
It's a huge leap, and like at the same time, it's like in most contexts, if you tell people like this God is speaking to me and telling me to do certain things, they send you somewhere. Like it's
right. That sounds crazy, and that's the condescending part to me.
Yeah,
it's like I don't want to say that everyone that's religious is crazy, but it sounds crazy.
It's clear like not everyone. Like once I was like in my asshole phase in my early 20s, I was like, this is all crazy and you must be insane or stupid.
Yes,
and then I had to be like, actually no, there are plenty of like really lovely, intelligent, like very very intelligent people. I'm not saying that patronizingly, who believe what they believe, and I don't understand it, but okay, like this is one of those things. It's not one of those. There are issues in my life where I have zero tolerance, don't want to be around, no patience for. And the fact that someone's religious it just can't. I decided it can't be that for me. But what about like an alt-right Trump boy? Are you talking to him and like want to open up a dialogue? No,
there's that notion right now I fucking hate. It's like if we just all like talk to each other and just like every point of view is the same.
Right, which is nuts.
Yes.
Like, so I think many things, but I think like it is true that the way we talk to poor people is patronizing and it's classist, and we have helped create this divide. I've been thinking a lot lately about the notion of the hillbilly and who does the notion of the hillbilly serve, and it's not the hillbilly himself, it's rich white people who want to believe that they're better than the hillbilly.
Sure.
And I think that's a thing, and at the same time I just but I think it's important to differentiate between like a white supremacist like Matthew Heimbach, who there is no reaching. He is the deplorable, right? He's they're like, don't bother with it. And like the hillbilly, you could actually reach and have a conversation with maybe. And at the same time, I'm very sympathetic, of course, to people of color who are just like, why? I'm not going to do this. Well, I don't blame them.
Yeah.
But maybe that's something, those of us who aren't people of color, like that's a burden that we should be taking on after Trump.
Well, I mean, there's all this talk of like the white working class after the election. It's weird because it's like a American culture, and the media seems to like rediscover poor white people all the time, and like where they are and what they're doing and stuff like that. And it's like this election has been the left kind of being like, oh man, we missed the white working class somehow.
Yeah.
And it just feels like that's a tricky thing to unpack.
It is very tricky, and that's one of the reasons I've been thinking about like the notion of the hillbilly as an idea, because it is kind of this mythical, creation. A
stereotype, kind of often used for comedy. I feel like
it's the butt of jokes, or it is just like I was trying to.
It's like a white minstrelsy almost.
Yeah, there is. I think that's not a wrong comparison. I was trying to unpack like the media fixation. So like, I wrote a little bit about this. I wrote a essay about Hillbilly Elegy and why I hated Hillbilly Elegy.
Part of the reason I want to talk to you.
Right. Yeah. So like, one of my issues at the time, and I think is actually still a problem, is that when people were writing about Trump country, they were writing about West Virginia, they were talking about my part of Virginia, they were talking about Eastern Kentucky, but no one's talking about Staten Island, and they're not mostly talking about upstate New York. They're not talking about Orange County, California. And those are the wealthier places that actually put Trump in office. Yeah. And yet, you know, we have this fixation on the white working class. So
that like a bunch of stupid poor people are the people that elected Trump.
Right.
Which is not really accurate.
It's not really accurate. But then, like, so the framing is skewed to begin with. And then you have people of color reacting to that skewed framing. Like, you know, these people still voted for a man who's going to deport my family.
Right.
Which is true. And people like me are like, that's true, but also you don't understand like these areas of Appalachia, for example, that you're writing about, and then you kind of fall into the trap where it almost seems like you're trying to romanticize racists.
Yes.
Which is not what I think anyone wants to do, but it's been rigged from the start. It's everyone's responding to a skewed framing.
Well, I mean, you come from this area, and it's an area that is very much either stereotyped or, you know, I think of like Michael Harrington, The Other America in the 60s being like a big moment where we're discovering poverty in this region of the country. What was racism like in that area? Like what was the level of racism that you saw around you?
I mean, it was definitely there. I remember my high school graduation, even a couple kids at my graduation ceremony had little Confederate flags pinned to their gowns. And right, and like the school didn't care and they didn't do anything about it. They had the Confederate flags on their trucks, whatever. And I saw that and I remember thinking, like, thank God. It's graduation day. I'm getting out. I never have to go back. And then I went to college in Ohio. My first year at this college in Ohio, which I didn't associate with the South or with Appalachia at all, someone painted a giant Confederate flag on like one of the big rocks on campus. And he wasn't from the South. He wasn't from Appalachia. He was from Ohio, and he thought this was good. You know, it was his heritage. It wasn't hate. You know, the things that you usually hear. And then... Yeah,
that symbol transcends the South.
It did, and I didn't really... I was very young, and, like, I didn't realize, actually, that this just wasn't an Appalachian problem. And then I go to Ohio, and I see the Confederate flag, and I remember one late night in Ohio after I was no longer subject to a curfew. I walk into this Waffle House with a bunch of people.
Waffle House makes an appearance. I hope it would,
And they're like lined up at the counter and they're eating their hash browns and they're like wearing white, like their white supremacist T-shirts with very racist imagery on the T-shirts.
Oh, Christ.
Which is never something that I saw in Appalachia. Now, like, it could have happened. I'm just saying, like, I didn't see it when I was living there full time, and then I go to Ohio and there it is. And, you know, my partner's from upstate New York. The first time I went up with him to meet his family, they're Confederate flags, and I'm like, this is upstate New York.
Yeah, well, upstate New York, I mean, come on.
Yeah, now I know that it's like Appalachia, basically.
Yeah. I wonder what you think of this, because I'm from the town called Ventura in Southern California, and there is an element in Ventura. People describe the town as either rednecks, hippies, or Mexicans. And the redneck element is an element that the Confederate flags are pretty present. You see them, and this is California. This is like sunny Southern California, Hollywood, Southern California. But the people in our town call that element Ventucky. They say, "Oh, it's a Ventucky person, Ventucky." Like you say, like, "Oh, I met this guy. He was a Ventucky." Yeah. And it's like, it plays into that idea that you're talking about this like kind of like national kind of symbolism of this a region of the country being the generator of all the racism, which is crazy.
It's magical thinking, because it would be such an easier world if we lived in a world where the racism was concentrated in Appalachia and we could just single Appalachia out.
Yeah, just do a genocide down there and you got rid of racism.
Exactly. Yeah. Just like let it go, forget about it, wall it off, whatever you want to do. And of course that's not reality. And I think one of the things that actually really bothers me about this hillbilly fixation is that actually undermines attempts to analyze the extent and breadth of racism in this country.
Yeah,
so
of course.
It's not helping people of color. It's not helping the hillbilly. It just helps rich white people.
No. I mean, this is the intersection of race and class and ignoring the structural issues. And also, like, I just hate, because, I mean, I've been in New York for 14, 15 years now. And, like, this is one of the most racist places I've ever lived. And, like, I just hate the notion always that I get from, like, I mean, literally, like, just a Park Slope liberal sitting in at the bar next to me, because for some reason I'm in Park Slope. It's near my place. It's near Sunset Park. There are nice bars there. Shut up. But either way, that kind of notion of, like, the moneyed New York liberal that's like, oh, well, you know, thank God we live here because there are so many racists everywhere else, is just, like, repulsive when we live in a city that is. I mean, the structural racism here is, like, on the surface. You can, like, see it in terms of projects, in terms of the police. It goes on and on. It's just kind of insane, the notion that hillbillies are the problem.
Right. No, it's so much bigger than that. I mean, we're right off Union Square, which is right in the middle of Manhattan, right? Right. And then I went to the Chipotle right off Union Square. And this was in the fall. I think it was after
over
the
by
election.
the Petco.
Yes, exactly.
Listen to how fucking corporate New York is now. Jesus Christ,
it's scary. Yeah. And then, like, I walk in and there's this guy in this T-shirt, and it's like, "Let's go Crusade Muslims" on his T-shirt.
What?
And, like, that's in right off Union. Maybe he's a tourist. I don't know, but, like, this is right off Union Square in Manhattan. And of course, like, it is good. Like, it is a problem in Appalachia. I spoke to a friend after the Charleston shooting, and he is black, and he grew up there, and he said it got worse. The racial harassment got worse after Charleston, and we had the Confederate flag parades. Like, my mom called me up complaining, like, she got stuck in one on her way home, and she didn't want people to think that she was participating.
So scary.
Yeah.
I mean, back to Kentucky in Ventura. My dad told me this story like 2 years ago, and I'm still, like, my mind is still blown by it, because when he says that on the day that Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, which would have been April 4th, 1968. My dad was like, the Confederate flags came out all over the gas stations and all over the Ventura. And it was, like, emboldened by the violence. Like, we're winning again. And, like, the fact that, like, the idea that it's just, like, laying there dormant. And then, like, something happens and, like, we all feel okay. I mean, the day after Trump was elected, I was on the subway in New York in, like, 6 in the morning. And it's probably why I said something, because it was 6 in the morning, and no one's happy at 6 in the morning on the subway. But, like, this dude, I think he was obviously a tourist, like, came in, and he was just, like, he had the Confederate flag T-shirt, hat, the whole deal in New York City.
Jesus.
Not only that, but in, like, deep Brooklyn. Like, I'm not talking about, like, some tourist area, 34th Street. It was deep Brooklyn. And I just looked at, I was like, I only had a minute because the doors were closing, but I was like, really, dude? Like, really, New York City? Come on. I hope someone kicks your ass. I really do.
It sounds like he was trying to start a fight.
Yeah.
Clearly.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's like a troll in real life.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it probably was a troll in real life. It's just the fact that, like, somebody thought that would be a good troll is depressing.
I mean, when you look at the doughy, pathetic white dude he was, it was like, there's so many other issues going on there. You know what I mean?
I'm sure he really likes gaming in his mom's basement or something.
Yeah, and I'm sure he's very, like, he feels very, like, sexually virile and satisfied in his life, and feels like he relates to women in a healthy way.
Yeah, he has taken the red pill.
Oh, my God.
Certainly.
I can throw so many stereotypes on that guy, and I bet 99% of them would be true.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go back to your life, because we got sidetracked by hillbillies. You're in college. So last time we checked in with you 10 minutes ago, you were in college. You were alienated by the culture of your Bob Jones-like university in Ohio. You graduated from there?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I made it through. I got my paper.
With a degree in Bible?
International studies, actually.
Nice.
Yeah, the minor, unfortunately, is Bible. Yes.
Oh, wow. I wish I had questions about the Bible.
I could probably answer them,
That's
unfortunately.
crazy.
If you ever needed someone in Bible trivia, I'm a monster.
So wait, why when I go to the hotels there's a Gideon Bible? Like, what's the difference? Is it a special edition? Are there deleted scenes?
This is so funny. So Gideon's is an organization.
Yes.
They're an evangelistic organization.
Okay.
And they are entirely dedicated to handing out Bibles to people for
That's their thing.
Yes. And it's not illegal. In my life before the New Republic, I worked for a First Amendment religious liberty organization that was pro separation of church and state. So like, it's not illegal for them to do that. There are some restrictions in public schools where they will also go to hand out Bibles. But when it comes to hotels, as long as they're like, I mean, yeah.
I don't think I check every time. There's like literally, I don't think I've ever been to a hotel where there wasn't a Gideon Bible.
It's like a lot of really dedicated old men, and this is what they do. And yeah, so it's like it's a branded Bible is effectively what it is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not. That's the only reason.
All right, thanks for that. So wait, this First Amendment organization, is this something you were working for after college?
Yeah, it was after I did grad school. I came back. I worked for Americans United for separation of church and state.
Where did you go to graduate school?
I went to Goldsmiths, University of London.
You went to London?
Yeah, I went to London. Yeah.
What was your thinking behind like going international? I mean, London's not really international. British people, whatever. But
it was to me. I had never lived in a city actually at all. I had always lived in very, very small towns, villages actually. And I was
places that barely had Blockbuster videos.
That didn't have
Blockbuster
just
videos.
Churches.
Holy Jesus.
Yeah. So
literally. All right.
Yeah. So I had never been to a city really at all, and I wanted to get out of Ohio, and I wanted to do something vastly different, and so I went to London.
Did you have an idea? And because I say this because of my own naive attitudes, was that like, I'm going to go to a cosmopolitan place where everyone's cool and like I'll both experience life in a more like robust way, but also maybe find people that are like-minded politically.
That was part of it. And I realized I didn't actually know very much and I hadn't gotten a very good education. So I was kind of desperate to get a better education, and I wanted, frankly, something on my resume that was not Cedarville University, because I wanted to actually be able to pay my bills at some point.
You didn't think you were going to cash in that Cedarville diploma for just millions?
If you want to be a pastor's wife, it's great, but, it was not...
That's what I wanted to be when I was a kid.
It is a little bit of prestige in its own way.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, yeah. All right, so you go to London. Was it everything you wanted? Did you go to secular school?
Yeah, Goldsmiths is University of London, so it was.
I'm ignorant about that.
And it was a Marxist department, so it was very, very. It was so different. And I did post-colonial studies, so.
Jesus. Okay, so this is a big change.
Yeah, I mean, so like my first few hours in London, I had to get from the airport to my room in Peckham, which is where I stayed when I first got there, and I had a meltdown. Like, I got as far as Victoria Station with my suitcases, and I lost my shit because there were so many people, and I'd never been on a subway, and I didn't know where I was going.
This is like an indie movie.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, so people I already knew there had to come get me and bring me back.
Yeah. I'm sitting here making fun of it, but that was very close to my first experiences in New York City. There were uncontrolled tears that just burst out at certain moments of being in Port Authority and things like that, where it's just I've never been in a crowd with this many people before.
It was very unnerving, and so London was very good and sometimes very awful, but it was exactly the sort of experience that I needed at the time, because I was completely kind of on my own. I was very far away from my family in this world where no one didn't know anything about the way I'd grown up at all. It was totally alien to them. So
if Americans don't know much about that region, then people in Great Britain are probably not.
Right, and
they're going to know a lot less.
Yeah, and it's not a very religious place, so it was very, very strange to them. But it was good.
Big accent switch, too, jeez.
Yeah, it's very strange, and they thought my accent was strange.
You don't have an accent, though.
No,
I don't hear it. Did you? Okay, so the accent thing has come up quite a few times with people that, resisted their accent. Did you have to consciously not develop an accent like that? Was it something that you intervened on to not have a southern twang? Is that in your family? Well, I mean, your family moved down there, right?
So my mom's from Maine, so she has no accent, but my dad's from the South originally, but he spent a lot of time outside of it. I had a slight accent according to what other people told me. And it did cross my mind, like, oh wow, like I want to keep an eye on it because I don't want it to get worse. Because
keep an eye on it.
Yeah, because I like people will think I'm a moron because I know what people think.
Isn't that fucked up though?
Yeah.
Like that's exactly what you're talking about, the hillbilly stereotype.
Exactly. So I was very glad that I didn't have a stronger accent. It does. So I've been told. Anyway, it comes out more when I am at home, but it's still not very strong. Like I don't have like a twang.
You sound like you're from Connecticut.
Yeah.
I don't mean that to offend you. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So I mean, graduate school. What years are you there in London?
So the master's program is a top master, so it's like it was a year. So I was there for a little over a year total. I'm trying to remember exactly. I want to say it was 2011 to 2012.
Okay. Yeah.
That I was there, and then I came back to Bristol for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got the job in D.C., and that was it.
So you're trained by this Marxist department.
Mm-hmm.
Where I came to the CUNY Graduate Center to do doctoral work in like 2004, and realized I was so stupid. Realized that, oh my God, like there's all these Marxists here, and I don't really know. I mean, I know what that is, but I didn't like ever consider myself on. And then all of a sudden, it's like, well, God, I think I might be a Marxist. It's like it's almost like the classic like indoctrination.
Yeah.
Of it, because I came in and I was like, I mean, I was already on the left, and I already like had all the feelings and values and politics, but I'd never really packaged it that way before, and I still don't. I mean, I don't really like go around saying I'm like a doctrinaire Marxist or anything like that.
Yeah.
But how did you relate to that when you were coming to that department?
It's funny because, like, growing up, Marxists were the big bad, right? Like, they were terrifying. Like, that was one of the reasons that you weren't supposed to send your kids to public school, even though my parents eventually did, because that's where the Marxists were. Wow. And, you go to Christian school to avoid the Marxists. And then I, like, willingly went to go live around Marxists.
The religious angle on the anti-communism is interesting.
Yeah. It's very real. So it was... I was definitely liberal by the time that I got there. Would have considered myself such.
Yeah.
Like, would have told you, oh, I'm a Democrat. Like, I thought that it was a very radical thing to say, which in my subculture, it was a very radical thing to say. And then I realized quickly that it is not. And so I started reading all this post-colonial theory, and I actually, like, read Marx for the first time, and I was like, actually, this explains a lot about what I saw growing up in a place like Appalachia. It even helps me understand my religious upbringing a bit better. So, like, wouldn't tell anyone. I mean, I do call myself a socialist, but, like, that's, I after having grown up fundamentalist Christian, I'm not eager to, like, rubber stamp something.
Yeah, me neither. It's really hard because I was like, I always hesitate to, like, call myself really anything. You know what I mean? Like, ever since I got really into, like, third wave ska in the late 90s and made that mistake for like a year of like, oh, that's what I am. I don't join groups anymore because it's embarrassing.
Yeah, like the reason I will tell people, oh, I'm a socialist, and like will say something like I'm on the left or I'm a feminist is because those particular statements I feel still have political value. And we have to normalize, for example, the idea of being a socialist or a feminist or like on the left at all. But yeah, it's...
Well, I mean, it sounds like that class and gender were both kind of like driving elements of your political development, right?
Yeah.
So, I don't know. What's the state of feminism in the region, like where you're from? Like, what does that even mean? I mean, I feel like feminism is a word that has gotten a lot of positive attention recently from the mainstream, but also still is a word that many people like bristle at and hate.
Yeah.
But what was it like in Appalachia?
It's not a popular word, at least in my slice of it growing up. You heard a lot of, like, I guess basically memes about, strong Southern women. And of course, like, women in Appalachia have historically been very strong and have been part of the organized labor movement. Like during the Pittston strike in Southwest Virginia, you had the Daughters of Mother Jones who like actually occupied coal company offices, so that you do have that history, and it's not necessarily conceived of as being feminist, but they would call themselves strong. almost paradoxically, you have very traditional gender roles that are supported by the version of conservative Christianity that's very popular there. Like, you're also supposed to want to be a wife and a mother. Not that there's anything intrinsically wrong with that, but there's a lot of pressure for you to want that, to dress in like a very ultra feminine way. And to conduct yourself in certain ways.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like this push and pull, where at the same time you do have this really interesting history of activism, and you have women who are doing incredible work now around sexual violence in the region, and anti-poverty work and environmental work. And women are a huge part, actually, of the environmental movement in Appalachia. But they've definitely got a tough road to hoe.
What were the issues that got you that were like, that's why I am concerned with gender and I am thinking about identifying myself as a feminist? Is it like reproductive issues? What were the issues that really like catalyzed things for you? It sounds like it's kind of cultural for you too, a little bit of like just how women are kind of perceived here.
Yeah, there were a couple of things. Abortion for me came much later, but one of the first things is like women in my version of Christianity were not allowed to preach. So, I'm supposed to go to church. I have to go to church. I have to participate in church, but I am never allowed to have any sort of role of spiritual authority that's completely verboten. And I'm supposed to be submissive. I'm supposed to be in submission to my father and eventually to my husband. And I just viewed that as just being infantilized my entire life. And then
this is personal. You're just basically like, I'm not going to do that.
Right. I'm not somebody's property. And I didn't, my religion was very important to me at the time. And so the idea that I was just going to have to be invisible effectively, I found very offensive. And then women are sexualized in this very strange way, where you're actually not supposed to be sexualized, but also you don't want to be a stumbling block. And if you don't dress exactly the right way or conduct yourself in exactly the right way, then you're going to cause your brothers in Christ to sin, and you don't want to do that.
What's a stumbling block?
Yeah.
Is that like a temptation? A woman that tempts you is a stumbling block?
Yeah, it's like, and it's such a strange, it's from the Bible, but it's also such a strange way of referring to human beings. Like, you're this actual physical obstacle in somebody's path to spiritual purity.
Yeah.
And, that was only...
just by your existence.
Yeah.
Literally just by you being alive and having a body.
Yeah.
You're going to fuck men up somehow.
Yeah, exactly.
And their success lifestyle. Yes.
Yeah. But they're very, apparently very fragile. This is a problem. And yet they're supposed to be my spiritual leaders. They're supposed to be my headship over me and tell me, help guide me.
Right. But they turn into a wolf, if you're wearing anything remotely quote unquote sexy.
And by sexy, we mean like showing collarbone or like...
Right. Well, that's the weird hysteria about the Islamophobia, right? Like Bill Maher likes to talk a lot. I mean, I shouldn't have even brought up his fucking name, but he likes to talk a lot about how women are treated by Islam, and it's just like, are you fucking kidding me, dude? Yeah. And I mean, Maher himself basically is always at the Playboy Mansion with the two girls on his arm and that kind of thing. And it's just like, do you not see? Yeah. Do you not see? But Maher is obviously an anti-religion guy, but this idea you're talking about of Christians in the South or in Appalachia, being having this attitude that's basically covering women with burqas, right?
Yeah, I think
there's an intersection there.
I mean, it's the old Handmaid's Tale comparison, right? It's, that's very much real. And I'm in the interesting position of having grown up in fundamentalist Christianity and then becoming an atheist and was, I guess, sort of tangentially kind of involved with organized atheism, sort of against my will, just because of my
organized
first job.
There's such a thing.
Yeah, believe it or not.
They have churches?
Well, actually.
Yeah.
Actually, yes. They wouldn't call them churches. But and there's plenty of sexism and just rampant misogyny there as well. So
that's so shocking.
Yeah, right. Shocking. I mean, the problem is just men, no offense, but
sorry.
It's the patriarchy, right? It's exactly
totally.
Yeah, it's what feminism always talked about. So I'm in this interesting position where I grew up with a very specific and very blatant form of it, almost cartoonishly sexist. And then I move into the secular world and it's better, but it's not by all that much.
So I mean, it must be hard because it's I mean, I didn't have those kinds of expectations put on me. I had different expectations, obviously, but the ones you had seemed like they were a little more like direct and harsh and very much related to you being a woman. But it's like, I don't know. How did you relate to other women in the area as you're like kind of stepping away from that role, if that makes sense?
It was hard. So it was very weird. I was primarily just around kids in my church for the most part, and then eventually I did go to public school and met people who just went to different churches. There wasn't a lot of religious diversity, but I didn't really get along with them because they at least from my perspective, and now that I'm obviously older, I can see that it's probably more complicated than this, but they seemed fine with it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them just seemed like, well, this is kind of how it is, and this is what I want, and I chafed at it. It's not what I wanted.
And I mean, that's the thing is, it's like this is the condescending thing of the liberal or the left person that is, or just elite person, whatever. That's like looking at people like that and being like literally like erasing their agency by kind of telling them that like you don't really want that. You've just been made that way by the men around you. And like, I don't want to feel that way. I don't want to say, and I couldn't possibly look someone in the eye and tell them like, you're not really in control of yourself. Mm-hmm. You're just a subject, just like we all are in some ways, right?
That is true. I think like you can approach it with some humility and yet still come to the conclusion that some beliefs are bad and people shouldn't hold them. And that's, without
I'm
being
fully
a Bill
ready
Maher.
to do that.
Which is like, but that was hard for me because I didn't want to be a Bill Maher and I didn't want to be a Richard Dawkins, but I also didn't want to be the sort of person who's like, well, feminism is whatever you want it to be, and like, no, it means something, and these beliefs are actually hurting you and oppressing you, and would oppress even more people if they were applied, given the force of law, for example.
What do you think about that notion? Because it's something that is I feel like has come out a lot recently, maybe associated with like the kind of bland corporate feminism that Hillary Clinton kind of promoted as part of her campaign, but like the idea that like feminism is just if you're a woman and you do whatever you want, and it's just kind of like this blank agency that doesn't really have a political component to it.
Yeah, so I was thinking about this the other day in the context of this debate over whether or not Zionists are welcome in the feminist movement. There was that kerfuffle online, and this piece in Harper's Bazaar, and the original title, which has since been changed, and of course, with the caveat, writers don't usually pick the titles, but the title was "There's No Right Kind of Feminist," and of course, this is obviously false. There is, that's not true, and feminism doesn't owe you a place in its ranks. Like, feminism is for you in that it's to achieve your liberation, but it's not obligated to admit you to the movement if you disagree with some fundamental feminist principle, It shouldn't be on feminism as like an idea, as a movement to bend itself to you. Otherwise, it's totally pointless and will accomplish absolutely nothing.
So you're talking about like pro-life feminists.
Yes, and like even then I would say, okay, if you are personally like, you would not get an abortion for yourself, even if you personally believe, I think abortion is murder, but you don't necessarily support abortion restrictions legally, or would maybe vote for a candidate who is pro-choice. I don't have as much of an issue with that, but if you are like, insert pro-life woman like Lila Rose, Kristen Hawkins, any of those, like, no.
Just no.
The answer is absolutely not. If you're working to legally restrict abortion for people, you're not a feminist.
Yeah, that's the same thing. I consider myself a Marxist, but also I'm starting a corporation, and I really believe in corporate capitalism. But I consider myself a Marxist. You're like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, Marxism, like feminism, is an established set of political principles. You're either down with it or not, but don't jump on it just because it feels like that I don't know, whatever happened with feminism in terms of becoming like that element of it, the like really blank girl power thing, kind of contributed to that, like losing the politics of it.
I mean, capitalism absorbs everything, and and it became another commodity that people can purchase, and you can put it on a t-shirt and you can buy it on a mug, and that doesn't necessarily mean there's anything intrinsically wrong with buying a mug or a t-shirt or making one, but the phenomenon is there to be analyzed.
It's like I'm really torn about it because, first of all, I'm not a woman. So, like, whenever I speak about it, I'm just like, this is what I think women should do. But, like, I don't know. So much is like, when you think about, like, little girls and, like, Beyonce and stuff like that, I'm like, is it so wrong that, like, they're being trained in an environment of corporate feminism that we as leftists are, like, really nitpicky about? But at the same time, it's like, this is why I'm torn, because I could just say, like, that's fucking awful. Are you kidding me? You're training people Beyonce. But at the same time, I'm also like, well, it's better than it used to be or something. It's really hard.
Yeah, it is very difficult. And I think, it's the whole representation debate, right? Like, it's not wrong to say we should have more LGBT representation in media or more female representation in media, because it's true. There should be more, and there should be less white people in media. That's all
easy
true.
There. You're talking to a white guy here.
Yeah.
I need a place too.
Same. But like, it's fair to like bring up those points, and representation is important. But if you're just talking about representation devoid of any structural critique that includes a critique of capitalism, then we're not going to get very far.
Yeah. I mean, and that's asking a lot of, like, to say that, like, I don't know, woman leaders got to be anti-capitalist.
Yeah, but I'm a socialist, so like that is actually that is actually what I think. But at the same time, like, I'm not gonna say, like, I feel like because I'm white, I obviously can't comment on what Beyonce, for example, just as an example, means to people. I, as someone who's like partially a feminist because there was no representation in my church, I can empathize with that, at least to a significant degree. But I do worry that we just do talk about representation and kind of nothing else.
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah. And Hillary's campaign contributed to that a little bit.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, I wrote a piece about it a while back about, this whole idea of celebrity feminism and how superficial it was. And, like, it is a political campaign, so you're not going to be, like, doling out Marxist theory on the campaign trail, probably. Yeah. But, it didn't do a service to feminism.
No. Well,
and it wasn't intended to, really.
No, I mean, it's one element, right? I mean, it's one, and I feel like the left dudes have been really, and I'm probably include myself by the fact that I bring it up all the time. Yeah. Like, oh, Hillary fucked up with her feminism. You know what I mean? There's it becomes this, like, obsessive thing of, like, that's what happened in America is Trump won because Hillary Clinton's bad feminism, which is, like, not really what happened.
Right. And also there are plenty of women who were very put off by her brand of feminism. Right. And it is so complicated because I want more women in office, but I want them to be women who are, fighting against systems that I deem to be oppressive, and Hillary Clinton was not one of those women.
Right. And I mean, we have Kellyanne Conway.
Who's worse.
Right. And like, I mean, would feminists celebrate Sarah Palin being president? Like
some of them did celebrate when she was vice president nominee. Like, some people said, oh wow, Theresa May is prime minister of the UK. Well, she's also a monster. So
yeah, that's nonsense. Dude.
Yeah,
come
but
on. And it's offensive to women too. It's like saying basically that, like, just because, then it's better. I mean, it gets to the point of, like, I mean, it's the joke online, right? Is that, like, the concentration camps that are coming, the women guards will be there, so it's like that will be progressive. Yeah, and that's a crazy notion.
Yeah, exactly. It's just got to be more than that. We have to demand more of politicians, especially, and I don't think that happened. So,
of course not. I mean, maybe it's a moment where people realize that we do have to demand. I mean, I feel like that's right after the election. There was, like, the JFK protests and the people rushing into Chuck Schumer's office. There's, like, all this stuff that's, like, collective realization that
those people aren't your friends.
Right.
Yeah.
How do you relate to, like, the state? And that's, like, a stupid question, like, in terms of a big question, but, like, in terms of, like, I don't know. There's, like, the left is really, really split about the state, about like what we do with them, and, like, do we engage with Democrats? Do we engage with the part, or do we, like, start our own new thing? Where are you in terms of all of that stuff?
I've been torn on that question because I am very, very obviously critical of the Democratic Party, and I don't believe that they really have any intention of working with the left.
Right.
So I don't really blame people who are like, forget it. I'm going to, like, take my energy elsewhere. I'm going to concentrate on, like, building up DSA or some third party. And I don't think that that's necessarily wrong. At the same time, I do think there's some validity to the argument that, we're in a crisis situation. The Democratic Party is the opposition party that we have, whether we like it or not. So
yeah.
And it's not wrong, I think, to be like, okay, I'm a Marxist, I'm a socialist, whatever, but I'm still going to call my Democratic legislator, and I'm still going to interact with them, and I'm still going to engage with them in this attempt to push the party to the left. But of course, the problem is, like, there has to be some, like, give on the Democratic Party's part, and that's what we haven't been seeing.
Unless we use violence and just do like a brutal takeover of the Democratic Party, with baseball bats and shit like that, and like just kind of it's Marxist now. That's it. I mean, the machinery is there. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of like coming across an old factory after the apocalypse, and we're like, we'll use this. It feels like the Democratic Party is a dead, broken party that could be, and I'm not optimistic, but could be. Hijacked by the DSA. We see like DSA is like aimed at the Democratic Party, isn't it?
Yeah, that is correct. And I think that, again, like that's why I think there's some validity to it. But at the same time, I don't expect anti-capitalist resistance from the Democratic Party.
Right.
I'm going to criticize them when they fail to do things that I think that they should do, but I also kind of don't really expect any better from them.
Yeah.
So,
no, me neither.
Yeah.
I've been alive a little bit longer than you, and I'm very much don't expect anything from them ever. Yeah. And in fact, what I do expect is them to collaborate with the enemy always, and then tell me why it's good for me.
Yeah, because, I mean, they're a political party concerned with remaining in power, and I have no such concerns.
God, what a bunch of shits. I hate the Democrats so much. The Obama years, you were in London, it sounds like, for a part of that?
I was. When he was reelected, I was in London, and then I was in college when he was elected the first time.
So, I feel like Obama was a moment for a lot of people, especially, left-leaning liberals to be like, wait a second, and all of a sudden, move left because they saw that Obama was not that. Was that something that, were you a Obama supporter that was disappointed with him? And that was part of your conversion to radicalism?
It was, when he was elected the first time, I was very, very pro-Obama, as I think a lot of people were. I was very young, and I really believed he was going to be more progressive than he turned out to be. And by the time of his re-election, I was definitely a bit more jaded.
Yeah.
And became increasingly jaded as the second term went on. But it was more of a gradual process because it was kind of occurring at the same time as detoxing from religious fundamentalism. And now I look back
and filling that empty space with Marxism.
Yeah, exactly. And now I look back at his administration, and obviously it was historical, but it was also such a disappointment as well. I just feel
really? I thought it was awesome.
Yeah, no, but it was I don't know. I remember I volunteered for a bit for him in Bristol, which was not the easiest thing in the world, and we had such hopes at the time. I think we all did, and they were crushed.
Well, I mean, there's such there's such a disjunction between who he presents himself as and what the policies were that it was hard to unpack, right? The idea of he's so, I like what he says so much, but what he does is not that.
I feel like he was probably always more moderate than we had wanted him to be, and we projected a lot of hopes onto Obama that he...
Projection is a problem.
Yeah, and he actually didn't say that much that was that radical at the time.
No.
We just wanted... I mean, we were all reacting to Bush, right? And we were
right. That's it. That really is it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I feel trapped in this cycle of presidents, because it's Obama was this guy that embodied this progressive notion of what America could be, this multiracial vision of democracy, and then it just Trump slaps you back. And Obama himself was appealing because he wasn't Bush.
Yeah.
It's we just had 8 years of this fucking idiot that couldn't get a sentence together, and when he did get a sentence together, it sounded awful. He went to war, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And then his Obama's policies weren't that different from George W. Bush's.
His foreign policy, especially, was pretty much identical in a lot of ways to George Bush's. So, like,
I would argue worse because he did the drone program and assassinations of American citizens,
and did nothing to restrict the surveillance state. So obviously, yeah, we didn't. And then, you know, if you still mention that around certain Democrats, it's like, well, how dare you criticize President Obama? And like, actually, he did some good things, but he also did a lot of really, really terrible things.
Yeah, and I really see him as like a very much a figure of late neoliberal capitalism, right? I mean, he's like the Rahm Emanuel school of really shitty politics when it comes down to it.
Yeah, I think it's an example of the failures of compromise. Like, the compromise is a principle. Like, he really believed in that, and you know, it let everybody down.
So, at what point do you like start writing about politics? Because that's what you are now. We've come full circle. We're to the present. We're sitting in the New Republic office right off Union Square. When did you start writing?
When I was a kid. I mean, I used to write a lot for fun, but I remember being around 12, and I wrote this terrible letter to the editor about how Al Gore was going to kill babies.
What?
Yeah, it was real bad, and like the editor of the paper called up my family and like, we're just making sure that your parents didn't write this for you. And I'm like, no, this is what I really think.
Yeah.
And it was at the time. And so, like, I was always very political, just in the wrong direction.
Oh, we have a lot in common. I wrote so many embarrassing editorials, I think.
Yeah.
Thank God that the internet wasn't around.
I don't believe in God, but if I did, I would praise him like more than once a day for it. But yeah, so I was always very political, and I had always wanted to write ideally, and it just ended up actually started to place more articles the older I got. And now I'm at the New Republic.
And how did that happen? I mean, how did you get? Was New York City something that like a place in mind that you wanted to be, or is it just like you were looking for jobs and you ended up in New York City?
It was more that I wanted to try writing full time. I wanted to try to make a go of it and make a job out of it. I was actually fine in DC. Like, I had friends there. My partner there, and we were doing fine. So it wasn't so much like, oh, I have to leave DC, although I was getting a little bit restless because DC is not a very exciting place.
Yeah,
once you've
I
seen
hear.
It. Yeah, you've seen it, and like there was nothing else. So I applied for this and got it, and they're like, oh, by the way, like if you want this job, you have to move to New York. So I moved to New York.
Nice.
Yeah.
And now, I mean, you consider yourself like a writer of the left.
Yeah,
right?
I think that's fair.
I mean, the left is like, what is the state of the left right now? It's really hard to tell, isn't it? It feels like, are we strong? Are we weak? Like, I'm done like predicting what's going to happen because it's impossible. But it's really hard to read. Like, is it? Cause you have like all these. There's this like rising Brooklyn left. You know, DSA seems like its meetings are filling up.
Yeah, they are.
Socialism is on the rise among young people. Bernie Sanders had a really great run. I mean, are these things that give you hope?
I do derive some hope from it. You know, it's just we're kind of building up from nothing. Yeah. And I almost think of the left as like a teenager that had a growth spurt, and it doesn't quite know where its body is and how strong it actually is and what to do.
And weird,
yeah, its voice keeps breaking. Like we haven't.
That's a great metaphor.
Yeah, and
you should write about that. Have you written about that?
I don't think I have
the
yet.
Adolescent left.
Yeah, because I think we're all it's a lot of very good-hearted people who want to make a positive difference. That sounds very trite, but I do believe it.
No, I agree.
And
it's okay to be earnest.
Yeah, I am. Yeah. That's like people talk about the dirtbag left. I'm actually extremely earnest, but and I think we're all just trying to figure out what the hell to do, and like what people keep trying to project labels onto the left, like the dirtbag left, the new radicals, like whatever. And I think we're just trying to figure out how we're going to keep poor people from dying at the rates they've been dying at. And it's
thank you. I mean, it gets back to like just for me it's like really important when we all have these arcane conversations about the left, that like this infighting that happens among like SJWs and all this bullshit that's like, I can't take it, I can't take another conversation about identity politics or whatever. And like and when you say that, like, can we get back to making sure poor people don't die?
Yeah.
Like, really?
Yeah.
Because that's legitimately what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And in all sorts of circumstances.
Yeah.
And all of them circumstances related directly to capitalism.
Yeah, exactly. And like the identity politics thing is just one of the dumbest things. Like, you know, I will be the first to critique the excesses of, like, there have been a lot of terrible arguments made in the service of identity politics. And at the same time, I don't view identity politics as being incompatible with socialism, like quite the opposite. And I think that's something that socialists and other people on the left actually need to start doing, is explaining, like, actually, this is intersectionality and this was always part of socialism and they're not incompatible at all, and like communicating that to people. But I think this is so dumb, but like so much of this happens on Twitter now.
Yeah.
And then we separate and we get defensive, and not without reason. Frequently there have been a lot of bad faith arguments made against the left to like oh, the left is misogynist, as if there aren't women in the left, or it's racist as if there aren't people of color in the left, like very strange arguments. And so much of this happens on Twitter, and I feel like
left people, and you know this from graduate school, because you did graduate school, left people and left graduate school people are like, academics, whatever, are all about like problematizing everything. So like even just a sentence of you say, well, let's stop poor people from dying, you know? Like, really, well, let's get into, like, death politics here. And what are you really talking about when you say dying? Because dying is a construct, you know? And you're, like, kind of like, oh, Jesus, really, dude?
Yeah.
Really? Yeah. Like, too much education. Too much.
Exactly. And I just feel like it's actually very useful to put it in very blunt terms like that. Like, there is a body count attached to policies.
Yeah.
And I prefer to reinforce that there is a body count attached to these policies and talking about them very earnestly and with a sense of urgency that I think they deserve. And I think a lot of, I know, like, a lot of people on the left, that's where they're at. And I think that's just what we need to keep emphasizing over and over
recenter
again.
that. Yeah, Sarah Jones, it's so great to talk to you. I feel like we really did accomplish what I sought to accomplish, which is to connect like where you're from with your politics. And like I feel like the idea of like resisting the kind of like big conversations you're talking about and recentering it to like kind of like what it's really about is in part a function of you not being a New Yorker your whole life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, people
no offense, New Yorkers.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
People are dying back home, and I would like that to stop, and that's why I'm on the left.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it. Okay, I want to thank my guest, Sarah Jones. I had a great time talking with her. It's always great to talk to a feminist Bernie bro, or a Bernie bro feminist, or however you want to put that. You know who you are, and if that's your politics, find Sarah Jones on Twitter. Look her up. Find her stuff on New Republic. Her writing is really great, and she's part of a generation of journalists who are touching on left issues, socialist issues in ways that we haven't seen in a while. So it's really exciting to talk to her, and I hope you enjoyed this conversation. You can find more at nostalgiatrap.com. All the episodes are free there. But if you want more stuff, you go to patreon.com/nostalgiatrap. Give me $5 a month, and we have bonus episodes happening with extra conversations. And for me, I'd be really excited about the stuff I'm going to send you in the mail, because I've got buttons and stickers with all sorts of Nostalgia Trap nonsense printed on them. And if you like Christmas in your mailbox, which I always enjoyed as a kid, then sign up and I'll send you stuff. And for the first round of subscribers, that stuff is on the way now. So patreon.com/nostalgiatrap to support the show. Okay, I'm done. Thank you so much. See you next time.